wrist guard used by an archer, and some tiny copper knives. But in amongst all of these, there was something very special. 2 identical pieces of gold. As they examined these more closely, they realized they were in fact ornaments, probably hair clasps, and both beautifully crafted.
They may not look very much now, tiny, with just a very simple pattern round the edge. But at the time when these were created and worn, that's nearly 4,500 years ago, these were probably the greatest treasures that anyone possessed in the British Isles.
For the first time, gold had been melted and shaped and then transformed into an ornament. This was a new kind of art, and the first of its kind in Britain. The big question then was, whose was it? Archaeologists needed to examine the skeleton in more detail, and what they discovered was that this man was not from the Stonehenge area. He'd come from Central Europe. He was a foreigner who'd made an epic journey to get to Britain.
It's a journey without compare at this time. And to cross the sea, he would only have had a dugout canoe or a coracle. It's a long and very dangerous journey.
How was it that a stranger from hundreds of miles away had come to be buried with all the trappings of a great and revered leader?
People would have known him as an exotic and an important person. He had something that nobody else had, and he had the skills to transform raw metal into these finished objects. He had knowledge and he had power.
It was the gold, so exquisite and rare, that had created the image of a leader.
These would have been like the crown jewels, strictly reserved for a leader of great importance. Art fit for a king. Just imagine how he would once have appeared to his subjects.
Our king would have looked magnificent. Dressed in a splendid leather tunic, his body and face lit up by shiny metals never before seen. The people who lived around Stonehenge would have worn nothing but simple animal skins. This man's appearance alone must have mesmerized them.
What this individual had discovered was something that we today take for granted. Art as personal adornment enhances your status. It lifts you above your peers. And our king was the first leader in Britain to exploit what would become a universal human trait.
And it's something that leaders from the time of Stonehenge to the present day have exploited. The adornments of office enhance your power. This power of art may now finally explain how such a colossal monument came to be built. It must have taken a leader of great power to organize the hundreds of people needed for such an undertaking. Our foreigner arrived with his gold around the time that Stonehenge was built. and it's likely that it was he who organized its construction. What's more, he may well have intended Stonehenge as the ultimate symbol of his power.
If our king did indeed build this, the most impressive prehistoric temple in Europe, then adornment had played a crucial role in his achievement. Art had become a political tool. It was the dawn of a new era.
And it wasn't just in ancient Britain. In other parts of the world, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, leaders were also discovering the power of art. Kings competed to wear ever more dazzling adornments and to build ever more fabulous structures. The images had a magical effect on those who saw them. But there was a catch. Kingdoms were growing in size, but the bigger they became, the harder it was for leaders to communicate their power. Their new subjects simply couldn't see them. Around 500 BC, this problem was particularly acute for one king above all. He'd taken control of a kingdom so large it was the world's first empire. He needed to find a new way to impose his power across all of this vast territory.
He was Darius the Great, the king of the Persians, and his capital was Persepolis.
Persepolis is in Iran, one of the wonders of the ancient world. "2,500 years ago, it stood at the heart of Darius's vast empire, an empire that stretched thousands of miles from the Mediterranean in the west to India in the east. From here, Darius ruled over millions of people across more than 20 nations. He carved the names of the most far-flung nations on a block of solid gold and buried it under Persepolis for posterity. But how on earth could he rule over so many diverse peoples? Darius came up with a plan, a new kind of political leadership which he outlined in a series of inscriptions. Their message was radical. Rather than war and brutality, Darius offered peace and cooperation.
In a war between two nations, I intervene to protect the weak. I am justice and have been asked by God to promote happiness.
Well, it's visionary stuff. The challenge to Darius, however, was how to communicate this to everyone else. His empire was one in which very few people could read, also one in which there were dozens of different languages. So how was he going to spread the word?
Darius's brainwave was the beginning of nothing less than an artistic revolution. The walls of Persepolis are covered with awe-inspiring images, but there was something unusual about them.